My security badge still worked when I walked into the office that Tuesday morning. Last time it would, though I didn't know that yet. I'm Rob Thompson, 48 years old, and I was juggling a lukewarm cup of coffee while troubleshooting a fraud detection algorithm that nobody even knew had started throwing false positives. Our core system, the one that landed us on the radar of that $150 million acquisition deal, was hiccuping on the East Coast payment processors. And if I hadn't caught it, Madison would have blamed network latency in tomorrow's stand-up like she always does when she doesn't understand something technical, which is most days. 25 years in this business teaches you to spot problems before they become disasters. Started my career right out of the Air Force, where precision wasn't just preferred, it was survival. 6 years of military service in cybersecurity operations, then nearly 2 decades bouncing between defense contractors and financial tech companies. I've seen systems fail spectacularly because someone cut corners or ignored the fundamentals. That's not happening on my watch. Meanwhile, I was 8 browser tabs deep in debugging code when Tyler, Madison's younger brother and our so-called head of strategy, came by with a coffee I didn't order. Said Madison sent it as a thank you for all my help during the due diligence sprint. I nearly choked on my existing coffee. The Caldwell family showing gratitude was about as rare as this company 6 years ago. Mine from the days when I lived in a cramped apartment in Austin, working 16-hour days on cybersecurity contracts while my wife Sarah worried about our financial future. Mine from before Madison got her Harvard MBA and Tyler got his corner office based purely on their last name being Caldwell. But technically, it belonged to a consulting LLC I'd formed back when I still believed in protecting my work. Thompson Consulting Systems. A name that probably meant nothing to the Caldwell kids but represented 3 years of my life poured into code. Something told me not to dissolve that entity when HR brought me on full-time at Caldwell Financial Technologies. Military training, maybe. Always keep your exit strategy ready. I shoved those original filings in my home office filing cabinet and forgot about them until this acquisition started moving. Sarah had asked me about it during tax season. Why are we still paying fees for that old business? But I'd just shrugged and paid the $200 annual maintenance fee out of habit. Now I was grateful for that habit. Inside the building, nobody cared how the fraud detection worked, just that it produced impressive charts showing 94% accuracy rates and millions in prevented losses. The engineers respected my experience because I actually understood the mathematics behind machine learning models. Legal ignored me because I wasn't management level, just another senior contributor who made the magic happen. Sales couldn't pronounce algorithm correctly but loved showing clients those beautiful dashboards with red bars shrinking month over month. I wasn't on the leadership page of our website. Didn't get invited to the fancy dinners with First National Bank's executives where they wore matching polo shirts and talked about synergies like they'd invented the concept. But every line of code they were about to sell had my fingerprints on it. I knew every detection parameter, every machine learning model, every hard-coded exception they never cleaned up before sharing builds with the buyer. I understood the mathematical foundations because I'd studied them during long nights at the kitchen table while Sarah graded her students' papers at the other end. She teaches high school mathematics, real math, not the corporate buzzword variety Madison threw around in meetings. I wasn't bitter about being excluded from the executive circus. Not really. You don't survive 25 years in tech and defense contracting without learning to keep your head down and do the work. The recognition comes from peers who understand what you've built, not from people who measure success in LinkedIn followers. I had my team, my projects, my purpose. They left me alone mostly because they needed me too much to mess with me. The fraud detection system processed 2 billion in transactions monthly. When it worked, nobody noticed. When it hiccuped, everyone panicked. That's the burden of building critical infrastructure. You're invisible until something breaks, until they didn't need me anymore. Because once that acquisition got serious, Madison started positioning herself as the visionary behind our fraud detection stack. My team meetings got moved without notice. I was suddenly excluded from architecture reviews I used to lead. Even my task assignments started getting reassigned to contractors whose names I didn't recognize. The subtle disrespect wasn't new. Madison had been undermining my authority since her father Theodore brought her in as Director of Strategic Initiatives 3 years ago, fresh out of business school with theories about disrupting traditional hierarchies and leveraging cross-functional synergies. I'd watched her stumble through technical presentations, confidently explaining concepts she'd clearly memorized from Wikipedia the night before. At first, I figured it was just reorganization chaos, the typical corporate shuffle before a big exit. We'd all get our bonuses. I'd finally take that fishing trip to Alaska I'd been promising Sarah for years. Maybe even retire early with a decent payout and spend more time in the workshop building furniture. But then Linda Hayes, our DevOps lead, and one of the few people who understood both the technical and political sides of our operation, asked me about a dependency in the core repository. It was one I'd custom built, deeply embedded in the fraud detection pipeline. "Rob, this package points to a private registry I don't recognize. Do you know what Thomson Consulting Systems is?" I did. That was my old LLC's package name, the one I used during my freelance days when I was building the foundation of what would become Caldwell's flagship product. The hairs on my arms stood up like before a lightning strike. "Yeah, that's mine," I said, keeping my voice steady. "From before I joined the company." Linda's eyebrows shot up. "Your package is embedded in the core system they're about to sell for $150 million? The weight of that realization settled on my shoulders like a heavy pack during a military march. Every step forward from here would require careful planning and precise execution. That evening, I drove home to our 2-story house in Cedar Park, the one Sarah and I bought when property values were still reasonable. She was in the kitchen grading geometry tests, red pen marks covering papers like a crime scene analyst's notes. After 20 years of marriage, she could read my mood before I said a word. "Rough day?" she asked, not looking up from a particularly brutal wrong answer about triangle calculations. Madison's trying to sell my fraud detection system as her own innovation. Sarah's pen stopped moving. She looked up with that expression she reserves for students who claim their homework was eaten by dogs. "The system you worked on for 3 years? The one you built during those late nights when I had to bring you sandwiches because you forgot to eat? That's the one." She set down her pen and gave me her full attention. In our house, work problems usually stayed at work, but this was different. This was about respect and recognition for nearly a quarter-century of professional effort. What are you going to do about it? I told her about Thomson Consulting Systems, the LLC I'd maintained out of what she used to call paranoid habit, but now seemed like strategic foresight. About the intellectual property clauses I'd written after getting burned by a defense contractor years earlier. About the packet repository that still carried my digital signature. Sarah listened without interrupting, the way she does when processing complex information. Finally, she nodded once. "So you actually own the technology they're trying to sell?" "Legally, yes. But proving it and doing something about it are different things." She stood up and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at our backyard where I'd been planning to build that workshop after retirement. "Rob, you've spent 25 years building your reputation. You've mentored dozens of engineers, solved problems nobody else could handle, and saved companies millions of dollars. Are you really going to let some entitled MBA take credit for your life's work?" When she put it like that, the answer was obvious. That night, I went to my home office and dug through the filing cabinet until I found those old incorporation papers. There it was, my name, my signature, and a clause about proprietary software retention rights that I'd written after studying military contracting law during my Air Force days. The document was more thorough than I'd remembered. Young Rob had been paranoid about intellectual property theft, probably because I'd seen too many good ideas disappear into corporate black holes. The clause specifically retained ownership of any algorithms, processes, or systems developed under the Thomson Consulting Systems banner, even if later integrated into client environments. I poured myself a beer, logged into the LLC's admin portal, and reactivated the business status. The state of Texas was happy to take my $200 and restore Thomson Consulting Systems to active standing. Just like that, my old company came back to life. The next morning, they announced the acquisition in the most corporate way possible. An all-hands meeting in the main conference room with catered sandwiches from that place that always skimps on the meat. Madison stood at the front wearing a blazer that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, jabbing at her laptop because the projector wouldn't cooperate. "Technical difficulties," Tyler called out helpfully from the front row, like he'd never seen an HDMI cable in his life. While Madison wrestled with basic presentation technology, I sat in the back thinking about irony. Here she was, struggling to connect a laptop to a projector, preparing to take credit for fraud detection algorithms that required understanding advanced mathematics, machine learning theory, and real-time data processing at scale. When she finally got the presentation working, Madison declared with that practiced smile she'd perfected during business school, "Today marks an exciting milestone. Caldwell Financial Technologies is being acquired by First National Bank for $150 million. Polite applause rippled through the room. A few genuine smiles from people who thought this meant job security. Someone in the back muttered about dress codes and corporate culture changes. "This validates our innovative approach to financial security," Madison continued, gesturing at slides showing revenue growth and customer acquisition metrics. "Our proprietary fraud detection platform has revolutionized how institutions protect themselves against financial crimes." Our proprietary platform. Revolutionary approach. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. The real irony was that Madison wasn't wrong about the technology's value. The fraud detection system was genuinely innovative, genuinely valuable, and genuinely revolutionary. She just had the wrong person taking credit for it. After the presentation, Madison made her way through the crowd, accepting congratulations like she'd personally coded every algorithm. When she reached my corner of the room, she gave me that condescending smile reserved for useful but replaceable employees. "Thanks for all your contributions during the development phase, Rob. Really appreciate the technical support." Technical support. 25 years of experience reduced to technical support. "Happy to help," I replied, matching her professional smile with one of my own. That professional smile would be the last one I'd waste on Madison Caldwell. 2 days later, I found out I'd been completely cut out of the technical due diligence process from a system notification. Not even a personal message or phone call. Just an access denied error when I tried to open the integration checklist we'd been building for weeks. The document I'd personally created, outlining every technical requirement for merging our fraud detection system with First National's infrastructure. I refreshed the page twice. Same message. Clicked the link again. Nothing. So I walked calmly to Madison's corner office, the one with motivational posters about thinking outside the box and disrupting traditional paradigms. The door was half open. Inside, she was leaning back in her chair, feet up on her desk, laughing with someone from First National's technical team on speakerphone. "Yeah, Rob was helpful during the initial development phase," she was saying, "but at this level we need strategic oversight, not just technical implementation. We've got this handled from here." I didn't knock, just pushed the door open wider. Madison jumped like I'd caught her going through someone else's desk. "Oh, hey Rob," she said, covering the phone mic with her hand like I couldn't still hear the banker's voice discussing integration timelines. "What's up? You revoked my access to the due diligence materials." She gave me that practiced smile she'd perfected during business school presentations. "Yeah, just temporary reorganization. Nothing personal. You know how these things work? Executive level strategy stuff. Above the technical implementation layer. Above the technical implementation layer. Like I hadn't spent the last 3 years building the system she was about to sell." "I see," I said, nodding once. "Just wanted to clarify." She relaxed slightly, thinking she'd handled the awkward conversation. "Great. Thanks for understanding, Rob. Really appreciate your flexibility during this transition." I turned around and walked out, past Tyler's office where he was probably researching buzzwords for his next strategy presentation, past the sales team pretending to work while checking their phones every 30 seconds, down to the parking garage where I sat in my truck for exactly 5 minutes, organizing my thoughts. Then I called Jackson Porter, my patent attorney. Still had his number saved from my freelance days under legal emergency. Jackson had helped me navigate intellectual property issues when I was transitioning from military contracting to civilian consulting work. Sharp lawyer, understood technology, didn't waste time on small talk. "Rob Thompson," he answered, sounding curious. "Haven't heard from you since you joined Caldwell full-time. What's the situation? They're selling my fraud detection algorithm as their proprietary technology." A pause, then a low whistle. "The Thompson Consulting Project? The one from your LLC? That's the one. They've cut me out of the due diligence process and are presenting it as Madison Caldwell's innovation. Tell me you kept the paperwork. Every document properly filed and notarized." Jackson was already pulling up files on his end. I could hear rapid typing in the background. "This is interesting. You never transferred the intellectual property rights when you joined as an employee? Standard employment agreement. Never mentioned prior work or consulting projects. I specifically kept Thompson Consulting Systems separate from my employment. And the LLC status? Reactivated it 2 days ago. Thompson Consulting Systems is officially active and owns the foundational algorithms they're trying to sell. Jackson chuckled, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. Then Caldwell Financial just made a very expensive legal mistake. You ready to remind them who actually developed what they're claiming to own? A security guard was doing his afternoon rounds, checking car doors and looking generally bored with life. The mundane scene felt surreal considering I was about to challenge a $150 million acquisition deal. What's the process? I asked. Formal cease and desist letter, backed by documentation proving prior ownership. We're not trying to kill their deal, just ensure proper licensing and recognition. Standard intellectual property protection. How long do we have? According to public filings, they're scheduled to sign final agreements Friday. That gives us 48 hours to file formal objections with both parties. Perfect timing. In military operations, we called this the optimal engagement window. Strike when the target is committed but before they can adapt. Let's do this properly, I said. Full documentation, professional approach, everything by the book. I'll draft the initial demand letter today. You still have administrative access to the original repositories? Madison doesn't understand technical permissions well enough to know what to revoke. I still have full access to the core systems. Beautiful. That gives us real-time proof of ownership. I'll also need copies of your original LLC filings, patent applications, and any correspondence about the technology development. Everything's organized and ready. I'll send digital copies within the hour. After hanging up, I drove home and spread every document from my Thompson Consulting days across the dining room table. Sarah found me there when she got back from school, surrounded by papers like I was planning a military operation. How's the revolution going? She asked, setting down her teacher bag and surveying the organized chaos. Jackson thinks we have a solid case. Madison never bothered to secure proper IP transfers when they brought me on as an employee. Sarah picked up one of the patent filings, scanning the technical language. So they've been building their entire acquisition pitch around technology you legally own? Essentially, yes. She shook her head, the way she does when students turn in obviously copied homework. How did they miss something this basic? Arrogance. Madison assumed that because I work for her father's company, everything I've ever built belongs to them. And Tyler? Tyler couldn't find intellectual property law with both hands and a GPS system. Sarah laughed despite the tension. So what happens next? Jackson files the formal objection tomorrow morning. First National's legal team will have to verify our claims before they can proceed with the acquisition, and if they verify that you're right, then Madison gets a very expensive lesson about the difference between managing people and owning their work. That evening, I organized every piece of evidence into a comprehensive package: original incorporation documents, patent filings with timestamps, Git repository logs showing my digital signatures on every major algorithm component, email threads discussing technology development during my freelance period. By midnight, I had assembled an airtight case proving ownership of the fraud detection technology that Caldwell Financial was trying to sell as their proprietary innovation. The package went to Jackson first thing Wednesday morning, with copies prepared for First National's legal team and Caldwell's corporate counsel. The revolution was officially underway. Jackson's cease and desist hit their legal department like a precision strike at 8:47 a.m. Thursday morning. Professional, documented, and absolutely devastating. The message was clear: you cannot sell intellectual property you do not legally own. I watched the fallout unfold from the coffee shop across the street, laptop open, pretending to work on personal projects while actually monitoring the chaos through the office windows. By 9:15, Madison was pacing behind her glass office wall like a caged animal. Tyler sat slumped in his chair, probably getting his first real education about corporate liability. Linda Hayes texted me around 10 a.m. "Holy hell, Rob. Emergency board meeting called for this afternoon. Madison looks like she's about to throw up." "What did you do?" I replied, reminded them who actually built what they're trying to sell. The buyer's response came through Jackson by noon. Not a phone call or email, but a formal legal notice delivered by courier to both Caldwell Financial and my home address. First National Bank was suspending all acquisition proceedings pending immediate clarification of intellectual property ownership disputes. Their legal team had moved fast. Within 4 hours, they'd verified my LLC documentation, checked the patent filings, and confirmed the repository ownership logs. Everything I'd claimed was independently verifiable through public records and digital timestamps. Sarah found me in the kitchen when she got home from school reading through First National's suspension notice for the third time. "How bad is it for them?" she asked, setting down her bag and looking over my shoulder at the legal documents. "Madison's about to explain to her father and the board why she tried to sell technology the company doesn't actually own. And for you? First National wants to meet directly. They're still interested in the acquisition, but they need proper licensing agreements before they'll proceed." Sarah poured herself a glass of wine, the good stuff we usually save for anniversaries. "So you went from being excluded to being essential in about 6 hours? Something like that." My phone rang before I could elaborate. Unknown number, but I recognized Theodore Caldwell's voice immediately when I answered. "Rob, this is Theodore." His tone was carefully controlled, not apologetic, but not hostile either. The voice of a businessman who'd built a successful company and knew when to cut his losses. "I think we need to talk. I'm available. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. My office. Just you and me." I arrived at Caldwell Financial Friday morning carrying the same leather portfolio I'd used during my military contracting days. Theodore was waiting in his corner office with coffee and what looked like a folder full of legal papers. At 65, he still had the sharp eyes of someone who'd built a company from nothing, but today he looked tired. "Rob, I'll be direct," he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "My legal team has reviewed your intellectual property claim. It's solid. We cannot complete this acquisition without resolving your ownership rights." I nodded and waited for him to continue. "Madison made some personnel decisions that I'm now learning about for the first time. That's not how we should have handled this situation." It wasn't exactly an apology, but coming from Theodore, it was acknowledgement. The man who'd built Caldwell Financial from a 3-person startup wasn't easily rattled. "I built that fraud detection system over 3 years," I said. "Started during my consulting period, perfected it after joining your company. But I never signed away my prior intellectual property rights." Theodore leaned back in his chair, processing the timeline. "The system that's generating 40% of our revenue. That would be the one." He slid a document across the desk. "This is a licensing agreement our attorneys prepared overnight. Full recognition of your authorship, ongoing royalties tied to system performance, and a substantial upfront payment for integration rights." I reviewed the terms carefully. It was more than fair, it was generous. Recognition as the principal architect, 15% of licensing revenue, and a $2 million upfront payment, plus continued involvement as principal systems architect reporting directly to Theodore, not Madison. "What happens to Madison and Tyler?" Theodore's expression tightened slightly. "Madison is transitioning to a consulting role with reduced responsibilities. Tyler is taking an extended leave of absence to reassess his career direction." This situation highlighted some management gaps that needed addressing. The irony wasn't lost on me. Madison, who'd spent 3 years managing me, was now being managed out of the company. The acquisition still moves forward? First National confirmed they want to proceed once we have proper licensing agreements in place. Your fraud detection system is exactly what they need for their digital transformation initiative. We shook hands on the deal, not because I wanted revenge, but because professional recognition was all I'd ever wanted. The acquisition closed 3 weeks later at the original $150 million valuation. My name appeared prominently in the technical documentation as principal architect, Thompson Advanced Detection System. First National specifically highlighted the fraud prevention capabilities in their press release, crediting innovative algorithms developed by industry veteran Robert Thompson. Madison left the company quietly before the deal finished. No farewell party, no LinkedIn post about exciting new opportunities. Tyler followed a week later, reportedly enrolling in a graduate program to explore new career directions. I stayed on as principal systems architect, working directly with First National's cybersecurity team to integrate my fraud detection algorithms into their broader financial protection infrastructure. The technology I'd built in my spare bedroom was now protecting $50 billion in daily transactions. 6 months later, I was presenting quarterly security metrics to First National's board of directors. Not charts about system uptime or processing speed, but real impact numbers. $47 million in prevented fraud losses, 99.2% accuracy rate, and 0 false positive incidents above our threshold parameters. After the presentation, their chief technology officer approached me in the hallway. "Rob, I want you to understand something. We didn't acquire Caldwell Financial for their management team or their corporate culture. We acquired them specifically for your fraud detection technology. You built something genuinely revolutionary." That recognition from people who actually understood the mathematics and engineering behind the system meant more than any corporate bonus or stock option package could have provided. Sarah and I used the licensing payment to finally build that workshop in our backyard. These days, I split my time between protecting billions of dollars in financial transactions and building custom furniture. Both require precision, patience, and attention to detail. The fraud detection system still runs continuously, processing millions of transactions daily. But now it carries the correct attribution, serves the right purpose, and benefits the person who actually created it. Sometimes professional justice takes time, but it's worth the wait.